What's going on, folks? Thanks for hitting that download button and checking out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich, and if this is your first time checking out an episode, first of all, welcome. Second, a bit about what we do here. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and just awesome folks that are on our radar and discuss the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that they use to create their content, run their business, and most importantly, be more productive. When it comes to toys, we go beyond action figures, Funko Pops, and the usual things that fall in the toys category and discuss other things that people enjoy, collect, and obsess over and that they consider their toys, whether it's something as simple as guitar picks or toothpicks, different spoons. You'd be surprised what people consider their toys. And we embrace those types of interests here with a lot of enthusiasm because, again, not all of us have the same interests, and what some person may consider their toys, others may not. And most importantly, it allows us to learn a little bit more about our guests on a personal level and break up some of the business and entrepreneur talk that we have on our shows. Now, with that intro out of the way, let's get some housekeeping done and turn it over to this week's guest. The only bit of housekeeping of note to kick things off that I want to remind everybody about is that you may notice things get a little weird when you're downloading episodes, whether for this show or other shows on the network. And it is because we are changing podcast hosts. We are moving away from Spreaker to podcast.co, a company based in the UK that has a very awesome system, and most importantly allows people that are on the network with us, whether it's our other hosts, myself, or someone who's managing the accounts, to see analytics and be able to share them very, very quickly versus the current way where I have to go through each show, pull up the analytics individually, and then forward them to our hosts. I want to put more control and transparency in the hands of our hosts, and Podcast CO allows me to do that. Now, Spreaker is a great service, and if you're looking to start a network or build out a network, Spreaker is a great partner. They ended up replacing Libsyn, who was pretty much the partner for My Take Radio in terms of podcast hosting for many, 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 many years. And I got to say, I co-sign Libsyn greatly because they not only allow people to get up and running with their podcast very quickly, but they take a lot of the heavy lifting out of the equation. Submitting your shows to iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, etc., they got you covered. Nice way to have show notes, piece of cake. You want a dedicated website for your podcast? They can do that too. Libsyn is great, doesn't cost a lot, doesn't break the bank, but if you're trying to start a network and you're not somebody with a massive, massive, massive audience, it's a little bit more cumbersome. You got to create individual accounts for your shows, etc. But again, each service has their place. Libsyn was phenomenal. Spreaker was great, but podcast.co not only was very compelling, but they also just took a lot of time to walk us through. We did a demo. Mind you, their team is based out of the UK for the most part, and they were incredibly accommodating. We've been doing the trial thus far. Very impressed with the amount of service and detail that they're providing us, and we look forward to a long and prosperous relationship with them. But I wanted to share that with all of you because, again, it will affect the RSS feeds for some of the shows and a couple of other little bugs that we are currently working on. So I wanted to share that with you to ensure that, you know, we are aware of what's going on. And if you run into any problems, do not hesitate to shoot me an email, rich@rageworks.net, or hit me up via any of the social channels for Rageworks or the Rageworks Podcast Network. All right. That housekeeping is pretty much it for this episode. This week's guest, very interesting, reached out to me directly through LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become an incredible resource to get guests for Toys and Tech of the Trade, alongside some of the other services that we used. This individual comes from the automotive space, disrupted the space with his unique idea, which I'm going to let him share with you. Had his company acquired, made a killing. now looking to disrupt the automotive refinancing space. Now you're probably asking yourself, I can refinance my car? How the hell do I do that? Well, this week's guest is going to break that down, but the short version, which I'll share with you, is that if you have a car loan and maybe you took that loan out and your credit wasn't good and then your credit got better and you're still paying through the nose for that car note and high interest rates, you are able to refinance that loan and not only save money, but definitely just get a better break when it comes to a vehicle. So you might lower the interest rate. You might get some more money in your pocket versus the current payment you have. All of that and much more is broken down by this week's guest. But you don't need to hear it from me. Let's turn it over to this week's guest and learn about the toys and tech of their trade. My guest for this week's episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade introduced himself kind of the same way that Tony Stark introduced himself to Captain America, by saying that he was a genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist. My guest this week introduced himself by saying that he was an investor, a CEO and co-founder, and a golfer, of all things. My guest this week, Nicholas Hinrichsen. Nick, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me.
When you and I connected on LinkedIn, it was interesting because did a little digging. And before we started recording, we realized that we were in a similar space. But your story is unique because you are part of a group of individuals that are disrupting, in this case, the automotive industry with your approach to business. And I want to get into that a little bit, but I want to kind of unpack your origin story first. You were explaining to me when you introduced yourself, you were a golfer, you were on the German golf national team. You went to Stanford Business School. So I want to kind of start there. How did you, how did someone go from being in the German golf national team to, Stanford Business School, then Y Combinator, et cetera? Let's kind of start there.
Yeah. The better question would be, how do you even get into playing golf in the first time?
Well, it's funny. I was gonna ask that, but more and more people are embracing that sport nowadays. So it's an interesting way to approach it, because some people are really into it, especially younger people that are seeing it as, a means to an end and trying to become a personality in the sport.
Yeah, that was not my intention. But what I ended up doing is so I'm from Germany originally. Soccer is big in Germany. So I played soccer for many years as a kid. And then we went skiing and I broke my leg. I hit a fence and I wasn't allowed to play soccer for half a year.
Wow.
And so I got bored, and then my parents are from Argentina originally. So we visited our family in Argentina. And while everybody was running around, hiking, climbing mountains, riding on horses, I wasn't allowed to do any of that. And so I just went to the golf course next door and started hitting balls in the driving range. And then I really started enjoying it. They gave me a handicap, like I just got it on the spot, which made no sense, but I got it. And then when I came back to Germany and I started playing these little tournaments, I started improving the handicap, and I was winning all these net prizes. And so I got hooked. Like, I just loved the fact that I was winning little prizes and could improve and could see this handicap go down. And then when I was 13 or so, I thought I was good. And somebody from my club told me, hey, come with us. We're going to this little summer camp, and the trainers of the state team are going to be there, and so you can meet them. And their first piece of feedback were, you're really talented, but you're really not a good golfer yet.
Oh,
and
geez.
So that really motivated me to try harder. And then took me a year to get on the Bavarian team, and then 2 years later, when I was 16, I joined the national team, and then I did that for 4 years.
Did you have any aspirations of going pro at the time, based on your improvements and being on the national team? Was that ever in the back of your mind or something you considered?
Yeah, good question. So there were like 5 moments or so when I thought I'm good, until I met better ones. And then I always realized I'm so far away from the top. I'm really tall. I'm 6'4", and so I hit the ball very far, and that's obviously a huge help. But I never got the short game to be in a place that was good enough to compete on that really high level. And then frankly, I ran a little bit out of patience in the end. And and going to college and studying computer science and finance felt a little bit more interesting. So I didn't pursue becoming a golf pro. A few of my friends did. In fact, Martin Kamer, you would know him because he's been very good. He and I, we shared rooms in hotels over the winters and in our training camps.
Now, doing that, and now obviously you mentioned that you took it towards going to college, and then when you got to college, you went into computer science. Did you put golf on the back burner? Were you still playing it for recreation at the time? Or were you just more in your studies?
I played recreationally. So I had to leave. This was a mutual decision. I left the national team because I didn't want to pursue it professionally, and like the team and the coaches and all the stakeholders obviously asked, so what's the next step? Do you want to become pro? And we'll support you. So that was a logical decision. I did continue playing for another 4 years or 5 years for the team that I played. So in Germany, it's slightly different than in the US. And in the US, you play on the college team, I guess.
Yep.
In Germany, it's organized in clubs. And so I played for my club and I played for the club team. And those now looking back are my best friends in Germany still.
Now, you are also, when it comes to studies, extremely well traveled. You said you had computer science and finance when you were in Germany, but you also went to school in Chile as well.
Yeah. So what a lot of my friends who play golf with me did, they went to a public university. Those universities are really good in Germany and they're for free. And so as a result, a lot of my friends who decided to not pursue golf professionally ended up continuing to play a lot. And so they never draw a strict line in the sand and made that strict decision. I didn't want that. And so I wanted to keep myself accountable. And instead of going to a public university, I went to a private university, which there aren't a lot in Germany. But the benefit of that program was that it was a 4-year program and you'd spend 1 year abroad. And out of the 1 year abroad, I spent half a year in Sydney, in Australia, and half a year in Viña del Mar, in Chile. And I chose Chile because I wanted to go to a Spanish-speaking country. I felt Spain was too close, so I wanted an adventure. Argentina would have been really fun, but my cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents lived in Argentina. And so had I gone there, I would have hung out with them. I would have spoken German all the time.
Right.
And so that's why I chose Chile.
Nice. And then you also went to the University of Sydney as well. Was that part of the same program?
Exactly, yeah. So Chile was Chile was a school that partnered with ours, and then in Sydney, I just chose a school that didn't partner with us, but that offered an exchange program. Two very fun but very different experiences. In Chile, I'm not sure whether you've been, but what you do a lot is travel, like the countryside and the countries, and all these adventures are incredibly fun and pretty. So you travel from one country to the next and from one adventure to the next.
Wow.
Sydney is different because Sydney is a big city. And so there we embraced city life, which was really fun too.
Now, these unique experiences in education, you went to Stanford Business School, you got your MBA there. Now, what kind of a shift was there in terms of just academics for you when you were learning in these unique international environments versus just coming into Stanford University where it's, work, so to speak, and the end game, in your case, the MBA, is the sole focus while you're there? How was it in terms of just culture shock and education shock?
Well, I'm going to shock you because it's actually slightly differently. In undergrad, I studied a lot. I worked a lot. The program in Germany is very compressed. So I really only spent 3 years in school in Germany and basically got the equivalent of a master's degree.
Wow.
So that was a lot of work. In Chile, I had to study in Spanish, and I speak Spanish because my parents speak Spanish. But I don't think that I could negotiate and talk about finance and complicated topics in Spanish. So that was not a truly academic experience. Sydney was a little bit because I did a lot of finance classes. And then lastly, the MBA. I moved to the US in 2011 to pursue the MBA. It's incredibly hard to get into Stanford. Frankly, you just need to be a little bit lucky too. In comparison to a lot of my classmates, I wonder why they let me in at all. But then once you're in, the MBA is for somebody who had studied business before, less a academic experience and more an experience of learning like very particular skills and making a lot of friends who are like-minded, and then ultimately almost a social experience. So in my case, other business classes, I had taken some of those already in undergrad, and instead I could focus a lot of my classes on design thinking, entrepreneurship, and venture capital. And so this is very tactical. It was very tactical for what I wanted to pursue and do after. Academically, it's not that hard. It's harder to get in than to pass.
Right.
But instead, you have like the opportunity to meet all these incredibly interesting people. And so looking back, that's primarily what I got out of the program, and I would do it again if I could.
Well, I mean, your time at Stanford was incredibly, it was incredibly successful. I mean, that's where you met Chris Coleman, your co-founder for your venture,
yeah.
which we're going to get into. So tell me a little bit how you met Chris and the origin of Carlypso and why you both decided that was the direction you wanted to go into.
Yeah. So I've never been particularly fascinated about cars. I drive them. I drive them fast in Germany on the highway, on the autobahn. But like cars wasn't a thing I was particularly interested in. Different from Chris. Chris is obsessed with cars. Like he's a huge car nut. His first car was a DeLorean, the one from Back to the Future. You know.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
You know. Yeah, that was his first car. He had a set budget from his parents for his first car, and his parents thought he'll use it on something like that's responsible and like a car that's in good condition. Instead, he used the budget to buy the coolest car that was wrecked, so he couldn't get it cheap. And so he bought a wrecked DeLorean and spent 2 years fixing it with his dad before he could drive it.
Wow.
So yeah, he loves cars. And then since he loved cars, he also wanted to pursue a career path in cars. And what he ended up doing between the first and second year at business school, he did an internship with McLaren, the Formula One company in the UK, thinking that would be his dream job, because his dream role was to work for a Formula One company. But then what he realized is, while the product is incredible, like the business of building cars is not as exciting.
Right.
And so instead of going back, he actually ended up signing an offer with a private equity fund. And then everything happened, because everybody, like all our classmates, knew that Chris was the expert to go to about car questions.
Right.
And while he and I spent a lot of time together thinking about what could he do entrepreneurially after business school, all of a sudden all the classmates approached us and asked us if we could sell their cars for them. And so first we said no and thought that's ridiculous. But then quickly we found ourselves selling 50, 60, 70 cars on Craigslist on behalf of our classmates.
Now, in terms of approaching it that way, were your classmates giving you any sort of a payment and then saying, "Hey, just sell my car. This is what I want to get," and take your cut?
Yeah, it was like we didn't do it for free. Although some of our classmates just assumed it was for free, and then we had difficult conversations.
Of course.
No, classmates approached us. We laughed. They're like, "No, I'm actually serious. Can you sell my car for me?" We jokingly said, "Well, if you pay me for it." And then they said, "Sure, how much do you want?" And so we asked ourselves, like we had to think about pricing. It had to be enough to make it worthwhile, but it couldn't have been too much. Otherwise, you just end up being a car dealership.
Right.
And so I think our pricing model was a minimum of $500 or 5% of the purchase price. That's the price we chose. The problem, what we ended up doing is we started selling cars. We found this really interesting way of selling cars where we didn't have to be there in person, because we end up spending a lot of time on test drives. And so we created the experience, a zip card-like experience, where you can swipe your ID, get access to the car, drive it, and then just go to the bank and pay for it.
Wow. We
raised $1.2 million from professors and lecturers and early-stage investors, went through Y Combinator, which is one of the most well-known startup accelerator programs, raised another $800,000, but ended up changing the model, because if you help a private person sell his car or her car to another private person, you'll find that the seller always thinks the cars are worth more than they are.
Of course.
Like people are in love. Some people name their cars. So it's actually really emotional. And then buyers who buy from private parties are so price sensitive, they'll just haggle forever. And so every time we made a deal happen, it felt like we were disappointing both of our customers.
Interesting. Now, how did you learn to balance that to where both sides of the deal would come away a little bit more satisfied? Plus, you would have a little, you personally would feel some sense of fulfillment.
Yeah. But the latter was what in the end drove us to rethink what we were doing. That market doesn't quite work. And so what we ended up doing is we removed all the private sellers. So we walked away from helping private sellers and started working with institutions, leasing companies, rental companies, and basically the wholesale auction, and made that inventory, which is normally the inventory that dealers buy in order to recondition and sell. We made that inventory available to consumers. And so overnight, we went from, say, 150 cars in inventory to 200,000 cars in inventory. And then the problems we had to solve were very different ones. We didn't have to negotiate with a seller. Instead, we needed to build software that at scale describes these vehicles very successfully.
Okay.
So we have 200,000 cars, you can't know every single one of them. Based on that model that then started growing really fast, we raised $8 million in venture funding.
Wow.
Grew the business to, it happened quickly then. We grew the business to around 150, 160 car sales per month, which that doesn't sound like a big number, but for an independent dealership is relatively big.
Yep.
That's the equivalent of a little north of $3 million in revenue per month.
Wow.
But then notice that in order to build a really big business, like $1 billion company, you actually need a lot of physical infrastructure. You need a lot of, be it reconditioning centers, you need a lot of personnel. And so what our investors signed up for was for us to use the money to invest in servers and software engineers. But what we ended up doing is we used the money to invest into like warehouses and used car factories. And so it wasn't a good fit at that time. And we were honest to ourselves and said, well, that's actually not the business we want to build. And so instead of continuing to sell cars, we started talking to our quote unquote competitors and other disruptors in the space. And quickly became close friends with the executives at Carvana, because they realized that we had built the software and they were in the process of building it too, and thought, well, if we just buy these guys, the whole company, and bring the team on, we can move quicker and have a talented team that can support us.
Right.
And so it didn't take us very long to agree on that path forward because it just made so much sense. And so instead of us raising more money, we ended up selling the business and to some extent the team and ourselves to Carvana.
Right. Now, I want to go back a little bit in terms of how you approach this, and I want to talk about your ability to raise funding, because as people that are looking to get into a space or grow their business, etc., how did you and Chris approach securing, let's start baby steps, the first round of funding? How was that meeting? How was the pitch for that? And how did you know that it was the right time to approach that particular crop of investors to secure financing?
Yeah. So I'll walk through that in a millisecond. One thing worth mentioning is Silicon Valley is all about venture capital and these high growth tech startups. So a lot of what I'm going to tell you will sound crazy and is likely not applicable for brick and mortar businesses. And so what ended up happening was Chris and I were selling cars. Chris had signed that private equity offer, right? He actually had a job waiting for him. I hadn't figured out what to do with my life. And so I asked one of our professors and friends and mentors to grab a beer with me so I can ask him a few questions and for advice. We sat down. I told him about how we're selling our classmates' cars, and I didn't notice how quickly time flew by. He said, okay, an hour's over. I need to leave. I think you already made your decision. You should not look for a job. I think you should be selling cars. And if you want to make this a company, I'd love to invest $50,000.
Wow.
And so I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, I love supporting students. I think you two are onto something. Clearly, it's a long way to go, and the business model might change. But you're hands-on. You've demonstrated that you understand that you're somewhat authentic to the space because you've already sold so many cars. So I would love to support you guys.
Wow.
And then I called Chris and told him, hey, we have a huge problem. Andy Rackler, that's the mentor I was talking about, very, very well-known figure in Silicon Valley, he wants to invest in our company that doesn't exist quite yet. And Chris is like, okay, great. So let's start a company.
I like how the conversation goes from, yeah, it's a company we don't have to, yeah, let's get that started.
Yeah.
That's tremendous.
These things happen here sometimes.
How'd that feel, like, to hear somebody say that they believed in your idea so much they wanted to put $50,000 in your hand?
Well, the craziest thing was, it wasn't even an idea. Like, it's not like it was on my mind as a new business. It was just something we
right.
did.
A hobby, like not a hobby, but just a side hustle.
Yeah, at best. and so I was surprised, and it took me a long time. And now with hindsight, obviously a lot of things make much more sense. But I wasn't sure whether this is how big companies are started, because if you hear other people's stories, they're being romanticized so much. It always sounds like, I went to my dorm room, I wrote some software, and then exploded, and went viral, and then this was $1 billion company.
Yep.
That's just not true. What I learned is, in order to start a company, you just need to get started with something. Everything will change anyway. And so the fact that we had gotten started with something was so valuable already. That's already a lot more than a lot of other founders do who create a presentation or mock up a few designs. Like, the fact that we had already sold cars, generated revenue, went a very long way for a number of the investors we talked to.
Right, because they knew that you already had skin in the game. So it made it easier.
And we learned something.
And it made it easier for them. A phrase I hear a lot is, invest in the jockey, not in the horse. So they knew that you and Chris were proven.
The proven is a very positive word, given our ignorance at the time, but at least we proved that we were hustlers. Let's put it that way.
There you go. That works. And the reason I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about that story is because, as you were saying, Silicon Valley, the venture capitalists, the venture capital space, many people, to your point, and I love what you said, romanticize how to start a business. And a lot of the stuff that's really about starting a business is just taking your strengths and playing off of them. Here in the case of you and Chris, you took this side hustle, like you said, and monetized it and turned it into something that people not only believed in, but that had proven results that made it easier for you to grow that business. And so much so that, like you said, Carvana came and was willing to not only bring in your technology and you and Chris, but leverage that as a way to grow their own platform. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah. You make it sound very flattering. Thanks for that.
Well, you know what it is? I try to.
No, that's how it was.
I want to paint it in a way that, obviously, there's always going to be struggles, there's going to be hardships, but I think that the biggest takeaway from our conversation so far is that you guys had no quit, because you and Chris didn't want to just follow along with everybody else that gets their MBA and just sits in a cubicle all day. I think that that's a very huge takeaway I want listeners to get from this. You guys didn't want to do that, even though that's kind of where the narrative would take you when you're going to business school. It's like, oh, you get out, maybe you start a business, maybe you consult, but a lot of people don't take the same level of control of their destiny like you and Chris did in this case.
That's true. That's especially true traditionally. We had one lecture, and I remember that as if it was yesterday. I think it must have been the last or second to last lecture, who said the following. He's an entrepreneur himself, went to business school himself. He said, you guys need to understand one thing. The second you graduated from, or you will graduate, you have this incredible safety net. You can't fall very deep. You can have almost every job you want. They're all very well paying. You're very ambitious, so you obviously want to be paid a lot and have a strong career and a good career. But this is your safety net. This needs to be your plan B. Your plan A needs to be something that's crazy,
right?
Where you run a big risk, where the upside is incredible, and where you can have massive impact on the world. And so it's almost your obligation to take a step back, be a little less selfish, don't think about your immediate compensation, but think about all the things you could do that other people can't do because they just can't have that same level of confidence in their ability to find a job.
Right.
And so that resonated a lot with me. That just meant that I shouldn't go, and I really didn't want to go to a company that was paying a lot, which there fortunately are a lot of options right after graduation. But instead, I went and sold cars. And I'm sure Chris and I were the two graduates who paid themselves the lowest salary, close to zero, along with all the other founders. But instead, we were trying to build something that would be impactful.
Now, going to Carvana, which you sold the company to Carvana in 2017. How did that come about? I know you said you had some conversations informally, but how was the day of that pitch when Carvana was like, "Hey, we'd like to acquire your company and your services"? Describe that day for me.
That's the next thing that's being romanticized. These things don't. In my life, they haven't happened like that. The way you do these things is, and it wasn't my strategy back then, but looking back, this is what happened. You ask for advice. You ask for, "Hey, let's compare notes." Same with investors. Every time we ask lecturers, a professor, "Hey, can I pick your brain? I want to learn something." We told them what we were doing, and then the professor said, "Hey, I'm really interested in this. Would you take my money?" The same happened with Carvana because we reached out to, believe it or not, one of our classmates. She had been working for Carvana at the time in partnerships, and I'd been friends with her from school. So I reached out to her and told her, "Hey, we're doing this and you're doing that. Would it make sense for us to be friendly and compare notes?" And she's like, "Sure, that's a great idea." So we hopped on a phone call, told them what we were building. I think they put two and two together really quickly. For me, this was more of a conversation around, is there something that's valuable? Is there something that we're good at that Carvana could get better at if we joined? And so the conversation of comparing notes and being really open and vulnerable and telling the other person and company what we're struggling with, but what we think we're good at, led to more and more conversations, and all of us realizing that, A, we like each other a lot. We got along really well, personally, and that's actually the most important thing.
Right.
And secondly, we had built something that would be complementary and would add value. And so then from then on, it was just a matter of determining some terms that would make sense for our investors, our team, and ourselves.
Now, when the acquisition came about and you essentially had to take care of the people that had invested initially, how did that conversation go about? Because I'm assuming when people invest, they tell you, "Hey, we're investing in you. Here's kind of a roundabout expectation that we have." Do you feel that when the Carvana acquisition came about, that those people would have been concerned that you guys were just giving a project away, that they going back to what I said before, they invested in you and Chris, and here you were giving that to a competitor, so to speak?
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts. A, obviously they got some money for it.
Mm-hmm. Which softens the blow.
That solves some of it. The goal was to build like $1 billion company, go public, just like Carvana ended up doing. We were just hyper intellectually honest around the strength of what we had built and the weaknesses.
Right.
And our company just would have never become Carvana. That's impossible. And so the best thing we could have done at the time was to figure out what's most valuable. And so, interestingly, we started and spent 4 years on building a car company, an operating business, a car company. What we ended up selling was a software company.
Which was a huge pivot, especially coming from your origin story, where you were saying you were selling classmates' cars, and you realized that. Cars, yeah. Yep, you realized that.
That's why I'm saying the most important thing in a startup and in business is you just need to get started. Like you know nothing today. It's so easy to talk yourself out of doing something.
Absolutely.
It's much harder to just get started and then pivot and iterate until you learn something that's unique. And so we're taking the same mindset this time. We have a conviction. We know what our values are. We know what's important to us. We know the level of impact we want to have. But we don't know for sure whether our next business, as we have it in our minds today, is going to turn out the way we have it in our minds today. We will get started. We will learn something. We'll make a lot of mistakes. these mistakes just must be costly. So we need to be open-minded, not do the same mistakes again, but be like being able to learn and savor surprises, and then we'll stumble into something that works.
What was the scariest part of this journey for you personally, as you were kind of discovering yourself? Because like you said, when you spoke to your professor and you had no plan, and he said, hey, you're going to go into this, and fate kind of made that decision for you. What were some of the fears you had? What kept you up at night dealing with all of this? Because this is a huge undertaking.
Many things. So every founder is kept up at night every day. I want to make sure that it doesn't sound like I'm the only one.
No, of course.
It's just true for everyone. Let's see. In the beginning, I didn't believe this. Like, I had these multiple phases. In the beginning, I didn't think this was going to be a business. Like, I felt I was just selling a bunch of cars. I just couldn't believe that big companies are started that way. Like now, obviously, I think very differently because I've gone through it once, and I have a lot of entrepreneur and founder friends who will tell one story to the media and press, but who tell the truth to me and tell me, no. I was like, I don't know, working in a sandwich shop and watched people how they clock in and clock out, and felt like these little merchants need software so they can track their hours, and so I built that. So most of the entrepreneurial stories start like that. Nobody tells them though, because like what people want to hear is how this was an overnight success. In our case, it was an overnight success, 7 years in the making.
Well, I'm glad you said that, and I wanna go a little deeper into that, because I think the scariest thing that a lot of people, they don't understand is that it's the iceberg is very deep. Even though it's big on the surface of the water, it goes very deep under the water. And in this case, like you said, you and Chris wanted to solve a problem. And I think that should be the foundation for any business. What problem can you solve that people just don't want to deal with? And you and Chris made it very, very simple. It's like, hey, you don't want to sell your car, we'll sell it for you. And I'm simplifying it only because when you hear it, you're like, what do you mean? Who doesn't want to sell their car and deal with that experience? And the answer is a lot more people than you think don't want to deal with that.
That's true. That's true. It's also the other thing you basically said implicitly, and I think it's important. Great businesses are very easy to describe.
Right.
Like there's a lot of things you can do which are really complicated and require a lot of stars to align, and mostly they don't. The best businesses are very easy and straightforward to explain, and it takes a lot of time to get to that place. Like you always complicate things. You learn, and once you understand the nuances, and you hit what we call product market fit. Product market fit means you have a product that people really want, and they're pulling out of your hands. Once you get there, you realize, oh, what I built makes total sense, and I should have had that idea a long time ago. I can't believe it took me so long.
No, it's very scary. And the thing about it is, in addition to, you've been involved in all these companies also, but you've also kind of paid it forward by becoming an investor yourself.
Yeah. So obviously you invest in order to yield a return on your money. But my investing is slightly different because, like, I just want to do what people did to me.
Right.
Andy got us started. He put us in a career path that I didn't even know it existed for us. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my friends too. My investment thesis is get in early to help the entrepreneur get traction, because you need momentum to raise money. And so I want to be that guy. And then only friends, because I know them really well. And like going in, this is what we told all our investors, all the angel investors, expect this money to be gone, write it off. And if it comes back, and if it's more, then we should all celebrate. And so this is how I'm looking at it. These angel investments, early stage, I'm primarily helping my friends. And if I get a financial return, that'd be incredible.
Right. Now, how did you feel telling an investor that? Because again, an investor is looking for a return, and you're like, hey, don't expect to get a return. Now, were you doing that because you kind of wanted to downplay it in case?
No, it depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
If you talk to institutional investors, who are in the business of investing, they know what they're doing. They
Okay.
know the odds of something working out. And so there you just have an honest conversation about, here's the business I want to build. This is how big it can become. Here are the risks, here are the opportunities. And then you just jointly with the investor together analyze, okay, so what's the path to building a big business? The investors I was referring to are individuals, private individuals who get really excited because a big fund is going to invest. They take that as a signal of, oh, this fund invested in all these other incredible companies. Maybe it's a sign that this one will succeed too. And then some people, none of my friends, luckily, because they understand what they're doing, but I wanted to be sure that people don't overstretch. They don't invest money that if they lost it, it would be a problem. And I just wanted to be crystal clear that I don't want to, I will have so many sleepless nights already because building a business is hard. I didn't want to have even more stress because I was potentially risking losing some of my friends' money. I think that's why it was really important for me to at least have had that conversation, and only or primarily with the angel investors, individuals who meant a lot to me.
I think that is a very classy approach, and I applaud that, because a lot of times people, they want to start a business and the first thing they say is, hey, ask your friends, ask your family, etc. And to do that, number one, you have to be mentally prepared for that. And also, whenever it's conversations about money, they are incredibly difficult. I think it's a scary concept for many people, and to see you going out there and investing and putting money to help friends fulfill their dreams and start their businesses is a noble endeavor. And where I wanted to take that is the fact that what are some criteria you look at when you're vetting a business personally, when you want to invest?
When I want to invest, I think that's why I wouldn't recommend you follow my investment. Number one rule needs to be good friends. I appreciate and I understand. I want good friends. That also means they're somewhat similar to me, so they like hustling. They roll up their sleeves. They do it because of grander motivations than just making money. So all the companies I invested in, if you listen to the founders talk, it's inspirational because they will not tell you, oh, I want this to be $1 billion company. They'll tell you, most of these investments happen to be in Latin America also. I want to change, I want to empower people who are living like the minimum wage to make more money and deliver food. And so these friends of mine built a food delivery business, and that felt like a really good mission to invest in. If I invested a little bit in a later stage, that's when there actually is a company. The number one thing that really matters is growth. Growth, while there is a path to making money, growth alone doesn't tough it. But most of my investments is that it's just based on friends who I want to help get going.
Now, you mentioned investing and doing a lot in Latin America. Do you feel that internationally there's other areas that have the potential to be the next Silicon Valley? I'm asking personally based on feeling.
Yeah, I think that's happened already. So China is very far away, but China has built some incredibly big companies. We don't notice very much because the Chinese market is so big that most of these companies are focused in China. But look at TikTok, for example.
Oh yeah, TikTok is a massive example.
There's a lot of very big businesses that don't come out of Silicon Valley. I think what we see happening more and more is that Silicon Valley investors have the courage to invest outside of Silicon Valley. That trend has been there before the pandemic started. So there's a bunch of businesses in other countries, often repeat founders who attract capital from Silicon Valley, who build businesses that worked in the US and do so very successfully. And now through the pandemic, one thing that has happened, investors in Silicon Valley always really liked the idea of having the teams and the founders somewhere nearby, be it on the peninsula here in the Bay Area or in San Francisco.
Right.
So they could go to board meetings in person. That meant hiring your team here because a lot of really talented software engineers, for example, are here. That has changed a lot. Now what investors, at least from the recent conversations I've had, support very much is, well, have a decentralized team. Don't force your team to be in the Bay Area where the cost of living is incredibly high. Let them be wherever they are and wherever they want to be. It's a win-win because people can live out in outdoorsy areas near their families where cost of living is much lower, and you can tap into a much broader talent pool. And so what we're seeing is that Silicon Valley is being somewhat decentralized. The capital is still here, although there's a lot of capital in New York as well, and Austin too.
Right.
But the companies are more distributed and more decentralized than they've ever been. And I think that's a really exciting trend.
I actually want to add on to that. I mean, Twitter was massive when they were like, hey, we're going to go remote or people working from home. And it's funny because a lot of people that actually moved to San Francisco, and like you said, the high cost of living, they were like, well, I guess I'm moving back to Nebraska, or I guess I'm moving here, or I'm moving there. And it was very refreshing to see because at the end of the day, this pandemic, while it's been terrible, it's also exposed a lot of inefficiencies in the systems that many companies had. And like you said, a decentralized team now isn't such a terrible thing, especially with the current climate.
Yeah, no, it's actually great. And I think it's great not because it's better for companies so they can hire everywhere else and spend less money. I think it's great because people overall are happier.
Yep.
They're not locked into small apartments in a very expensive city that gets more and more expensive. Instead, they can afford a house in a suburban area near their families, raise a family, and the money they earn goes so much further. So I think it's a win-win. I think the people who struggle short term is like real estate investors in San Francisco, because they were buying into this never-ending increases in prices. So I'm afraid they're struggling a little bit. I hope they recover quickly. But yeah, for the individuals and then I think society, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you actually bring that up because, I mean, here in New York, it's a lot of that too. You have so many offices, so many large spaces in Wall Street and in downtown in Manhattan, and then people are like hesitant about taking public transportation, etc. And what's happening is more and more people are embracing living outside of the boroughs here in New York City because of that. So yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because it's a very similar situation here in New York for that exact reason. It's becoming more widely accepted because there's so many other ways that people can conduct business.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Very similar.
Now, I want to move into one other aspect of your journey. You've done so much already investing into other companies, starting your own, etc. I want to talk about with Clutch and get into that a little bit because this venture looks to change the game in the automotive finance industry, and I want to break that down and understand where you're going with this brand and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, so that business was born out of two insights that we had over the last 7 years, things that I would have not known had I not been in the car space. Number one, when we were selling cars ourselves, we noticed this one awkward behavior. Customers haggled forever on the price of the car.
Yep.
And didn't trust us and came out with so many questions and wanted mechanics to inspect these cars. So definitely didn't trust us. And that's true for every car dealer on the car. Once they were over the hurdle of trusting us in the car and fell in love with the vehicle, then we had conversations around how to pay for it. And all of a sudden, they fully trusted us as a dealer and getting them a great loan. And so that didn't make any sense to us. For us, it created a weird tension because we look at the screen and see, there's 10 loans available for this customer. One offers a low interest rate, but another one offers a really high referral fee to us as a dealership. Which one should I give the customer? And so while we try to do the right thing and give the customer the loan with the lowest rate, we notice that this tension exists, and long term, it will just result into what happens day to day in normal used car dealerships. Customers don't get the best loan that has the lowest interest rate. They get the loan that pays the dealership the highest referral fee.
Oh, geez.
So the second you drive off the lot, you could already refinance your car loan and save money. That's insight number one. Insight number two is that's especially true for people with a credit score below, say, 700. If you make your payments, your credit score moves a lot very quickly.
Yep.
And so if you had like challenge credit, let's say your credit score was 600 when you bought the car, your rate was 15%. Auto rates can be as high as 29%. So it's crazy what people sometimes have to pay depending on their credit. Let's assume you have 600 credit, your rate is 15%. You make your 6, 12, 18 payments. Your credit score will move from 600 much closer to 700.
Yes.
And once that happens, you would qualify for a much lower rate. That means if you were to buy a car at that point in time, your rate would be much closer to 10, 9, or 8%. Maybe lower. 700 could be 6 or 5%. And you're still stuck in the loan that you had from the beginning that costs you 50% a month. Nobody refinances auto loans. Nobody's not quite true, but very few people refinance auto loans. Yet
That's
you
true.
could save thousands of dollars. And so that's why we decided to build a digital platform to help customers refinance auto loans from the comfort of their home.
Now, and it's funny because my wife leases now, and I remember previously she was financing a vehicle, and you bring up a very good point. When it comes time to show that customer the screen, when it comes to loan offerings, there's always that, depending on the dealership, there's always that little bit of an unscrupulous practice that could come into play. Like you said, who's going to give the bigger referral? I mean, the only reason why we used to but we used to not get taken advantage of was because I would pull the card based on my employment on where I worked. And I'd say, listen, don't come and hit us with this because I know this and this and this. And you bring up a very valid point. It's a very scary thing. And a lot of people, they just get into that endless cycle of financing, paying their car note, and not doing their research, realizing that they could probably save hundreds of dollars or thousands over the course of their loan if they just went that extra mile and refinanced.
Exactly. To put things into perspective, last year, in 2019, almost 50% of the mortgages, of the funded mortgage applications were refinancing.
Yep.
And that's because the interest rate dropped.
Absolutely.
By like 0.5% or so. Meanwhile, less than 5% of the funded auto loan applications were refinances. And the savings, like the interest rate difference for a car loan after you make your payments is more like 5 or 6 or 7% percentage point you can take off, versus a mortgage where the interest rate may drop for like half a percent or by 0.5%. So the opportunities to save money on a car are very high. People just don't do it, and the people who know you can do it find that it's really inconvenient because you have to go to the branches, you have to sign paperwork with real ink.
Yep.
On DMV forms, and so that's what we're trying to change.
Now, based on this and this approach, do you feel that with the success of Carvana, you know, your current endeavor with Clutch, do you feel that as we move towards just adjusting with the current climate, that these are the ways and the things that people should be looking towards, services like you said that just save you the headaches, save you having to walk in and sign forms, and more importantly, be overwhelmed with information? As I went through the With Clutch site, I really respected the fact that you broke down every facet, every problem that customers run into, and more importantly, you answered a lot of questions.
Yeah, so let's address Carvana first, because I think that's a really interesting story. Like a year ago, Carvana was already very, very big and growing incredibly fast. And yet you would find a lot of people out there who tell you buying a used car online, sight unseen, is crazy. Who does that?
Yes.
Fast forward, the pandemic happens. Now if you talk to people in the street, they'll tell you test driving a car, going to a dealership and test driving a car is crazy. So the times have changed. Like there was a huge inflection point, and people now think that what used to be crazy isn't crazy anymore. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. I mean, my wife and I, when we had my daughter, we needed her lease was up, and we went to get a new vehicle, and it was just a very draining experience, because you get there, you got to pick a car, they got to find you one to test drive. You and I both know that they conveniently keep you there as long as humanly possible. And by the time you get to the stage of signing papers, you're just so exhausted that you want it to be over and done with.
Yeah, and the worst part is still to come.
Yep. Because then when you get into talking to the loan officer and negotiating rates, etc., you're at that point you're so beaten up to like what you said, you just want to go forward and you sign what you sign, as long as it's somewhat in line to what you're willing to pay. You don't even want to ask too many questions.
Yeah. So that's car retail. The refinancing model that we're talking about and looking into right now, the dynamics are slightly different. The reason why I think this is a really interesting opportunity is because it helps people. There's people right now who need cash because they lost their jobs and they're running out of the stimulus checks. And so people will have to look for creative ways to get some cash. And one really creative way and untapped is to tap into the equity of your car. Some people have made payments. The car is worth more than they owe. So refinancing, just like you would do with a mortgage, your car is a really interesting way to get access to some extra cash or save on a monthly basis. So I think it's really particularly interesting for today, number one, and then there will be a second wave in, I'd argue, 18 to 24 months from now, where the people who lost their job today, who missed a credit card payment or two, hence decreased in credit score, then bought a car, will then have a job again, will have made payments, will have improved their credit, and should then refinance. And so I foresee these two waves, one now that's immediate, and one in 2 years or so from now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting shift in the pendulum, so to speak, because what's happening now is there's certainty in some spaces, but a lot of uncertainty in others. Like right now,
very much so.
With exactly like you said, stimulus, unemployment benefits, all of that is kind of up in the air right now. And this being an election year, it's going to be even more up in the air before things get back to normal somewhat in the new year. But in the interim, people, like you said, they're trying to find ways to save money, find ways to cut costs, and they may not even know, to your point, and I want the listeners to know, that you can refinance. You can refinance your auto loan. You can get a lower rate. You can save some extra money. It is possible.
Yep, I agree. Truly believe so.
Now, I think that with Clutch, you're moving fully online with this platform. What is your end game? What would you like the message to be for people when they come to the site and are looking to refinance? What do you want to lead with, or at least what message do you want to impart here so that they can check out with Clutch?
So the main thing I want to get across is like our main motivation behind what we're doing. When I moved to the US, I didn't have any credit. Like I needed to build credit. It took me a long time. I realized how disadvantaged you are if you have bad credit score or a thin file in my case. And so what I want to do is I really particularly want to help people get out of bad credit and help accelerate the process of getting into good credit. Because ultimately, if you don't have access to capital, or if your capital is incredibly costly and you're forced to make these interest payments on your expensive car, it's very, very, very difficult to get out of debt and build wealth. And so the main driver behind what we're doing is to help people get out of debt, address, or do our part at least to some extent, address income inequality. And therefore, I'm hopeful that as many people as possible reach out, either through the website or directly through me through LinkedIn, for example, so I can help.
I will definitely make sure to include links for obviously people to connect with you on LinkedIn, but also with Clutch as well. In the current climate that we're in, every penny saved is a penny earned, and I think that what you guys are doing is definitely innovative and is very, very timely.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We want to move into the next phase of our show, which is what we call the hot seat. It's a series of rapid fire questions, some business related, some personal, just to share some different insights about you as a person and as an entrepreneur.
Let's do it.
All right. So when you start your day, what's the first thing you do? Do you open your phone, check your email, or do you take a few minutes, have coffee?
What I try to force myself to do is get up and go for a run.
Nice.
So I'm trying to, for 3 or 4 days a week, I'm trying to get up and go for a run before I check my emails or anything.
Excellent. And is this a practice that you've been doing for a while, or is this something that now with the current state of things you have embraced?
This is a good question. So I started going for my morning runs 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
That was towards the end of our previous company when things just became incredibly stressful. And I noticed that I have feeling a little anxiety, and I didn't feel like I was at the top of my game, and I was worried, and it's just incredibly stressful when you sell the company and you have to deal with all these stakeholders. And what I found, and this was serendipitous, is that if I run, even if I run really slowly, if I just get the blood circulating in my body, I don't feel this level of anxiety, and I make better decisions, and I'm much calmer. And so it actually reminded me a lot of my time playing golf, where I became really good at being really calm. And so that's how I got into it, and I've just maintained that practice.
Excellent. That's a great way to break it down, especially when you were saying that you were using it to combat anxiety. I think a lot of people don't realize that sometimes, like you said, going for a run, going outside, just sitting outside, getting some sunlight, will do wonders before you kind of tackle the rigors of the day.
What I've found is the trick is to run so slowly that it's not exhausting. Otherwise, you just get upset that you're feeling exhausted. And like the first 20-minute runs that I did were slowly and felt like barely faster than walking, and it didn't bother me. Otherwise, I always hated going for runs because I thought it was so boring.
Do you track your runs?
No, there's this loop that I run. It's 3.3 miles. If I'm good, I can do it in 25 minutes.
Okay.
But I don't particularly track it.
Okay. Very cool. Do you use an Android or an iOS device?
I have an iPhone.
All right. Always been team iPhone, or?
I've broken probably like 10 iPhones.
Oh man,
I'm the best customer of their insurance product. I've had an iPhone ever since, I don't know, when did I move in 2011? Probably 2009 or so. And then once you're stuck, I mean, this is a good company because you get stuck on these products, never changed.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works. You get into the ecosystem and then you say, I got this iPhone. Maybe let me get these AirPods. Let me get this Apple Watch. And before you know it, you have almost every Apple device in your house.
All these 80% margin products. No wonder Apple, I think at the point in time, again, is the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be crazy when they do the stock split at the end of August. A lot of people are going to buy a lot more stock.
Can't afford it, yeah.
What are 3 mobile apps you can't live without?
I'm actually not that active on apps. I obviously check my email. That's the normal app. Nothing special. I love and heavily use WhatsApp. WhatsApp is basically the messenger that allows you to message internationally, and so since my family is on WhatsApp, and internationally, they all live in Germany, and a lot of my friends in South America and worldwide, it's just the most convenient way to communicate. And I don't like social media a lot. I don't like exposing myself or, I don't know, publishing photos, but I do like interacting with individuals directly through WhatsApp. So I'm using that a lot. And then the third one, actually, LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become more and more valuable for me because I feel like I've tapped into a network of people who post interesting things, and so I'm learning. And they're not posting TikTok videos of themselves, but actually interesting stuff. And so I would argue my emails, my WhatsApp, my LinkedIn.
It's interesting because LinkedIn, and I'm glad you mentioned it. LinkedIn obviously is one way that we connected, and I've realized as during the tenure of this particular podcast, LinkedIn has led me to I want to say at least 50% of the guests that we've had for this podcast, just because there's more value in the stories that you share, especially if it's the entrepreneurial endeavors, because I think LinkedIn just resonates very well with that. And to your point, you don't have that over the distractions of, oh, here's my sandwich. Oh, here's my hamburger. Oh, I took this quiz. Like, I definitely feel I was very apprehensive to LinkedIn maybe a year or two ago, just because I was still working at my current employer and I didn't want to share a lot of like my projects, because I kind of feel that, you know, all eyes are on you, especially if you connect with colleagues. So I didn't want that to be a thing where people are like, oh, you weren't working on this because you're too busy working on X. But but now it's more so I love sharing, to your point, just sharing the shows that we do, some of the content I create. And I agree, LinkedIn is definitely the move, especially this year. And with the current employment climate, especially, you need to be out there and you need to be present. And that's a great platform to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
When you run, do you listen to music?
Yeah, mostly Latin American music.
Nice.
The same songs over and over and over again.
Do you have a Spotify playlist or just your own curated music?
My own list that I listen to, and it's the same list that I've been listening to for like 3 years.
Nice.
Don't judge me by it.
Nope, it's all good. What's your favorite piece of tech besides your phone or your computer?
Favorite piece of tech. Piece of tech. We have my roommate. I live with two roommates, very, very good friend of mine. My one roommate, she has a piano, like a keyboard, in the living room. And so I catch myself sitting down and play songs. I used to play piano when I was a kid. And so sometimes when I find a little bit of time or need to like just procrastinate, sometimes procrastinating is great.
Yep.
When I find these moments, I sit down and play the keyboard.
That's pretty cool. That is one of the first times I've ever heard of a keyboard as a favorite piece of tech. But it's good because I think that it inspires creativity, especially if you previously played piano. I think it also helps you get more centered.
That's true. That's what I feel.
What was the last book you read?
Oh, that's a good one. The last book I read it's called Never Split the Difference. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't actually.
It's really good. It's written by this guy who used to be an FBI hostage negotiator.
Wow!
And so he told the story how they developed the protocol, how to negotiate with hostage takers, and then realized this is super applicable to business too. And so I read it and I thought this was very, very helpful. I learned a lot, and I actually started applying it when I last negotiated my rent. So yeah, that's a good book. And even if you don't want to learn about negotiation, it's just really fun to hear the story and learn.
Awesome. What's an item that you've purchased recently that's less than $100 that's made your life either easier or more enjoyable?
I've purchased food. I haven't purchased a lot ever since quarantine because you can't leave the house.
This is true.
What did I buy? I didn't buy a lot. Oh, this must have been a piece of software that I bought. I bought a few tools that help me being productive.
Okay.
I forgot. I think one tool I bought. This is so random. That's an event tracking tool. So now I'm nerding out here. This allows you to track where the users are coming from that go to the website, and then it tracks where they're going, what they're looking at. You can watch sessions so you can improve the website.
Excellent.
That's something I bought recently. That was, I think, $89.
Excellent. Now, do you feel that that level of information is vital in terms of structuring your website?
So yeah, I think you have two phases. Phase number one is, and this goes very much in line with how businesses are built, are finding something that people want. And so you can't optimize your website to providing value. In fact, it's the opposite. The Andy Ratcliffe, the professor I mentioned who got us going with our startup, he was the first investor in eBay. And he said, we invested in eBay because of how well it worked despite how ugly the website was. And so what he said is like, this product is so great, the value is so high that it provides to users. Imagine what happens if you optimize it.
Right.
And so we're in the phase clearly where we need to find value and figure out what is the value proposition that resonates most. And so instead of finding like little areas of optimization, I'm trying to find where the website crashes on people because I've forgotten about an edge case or something like that.
Right. That's it's very important. I think that learning how your ideal customer thinks allows you to create a better experience.
Yeah, customers will tell you what they want you to build for them. Like, that's why the most important thing is feedback. Feedback is a gift.
Growing up, what was your favorite toy or collectible that you had as a child?
Wow, all these questions. These are really good questions. I had a remote controlled car. I loved playing around with remote controlled cars. I wanted to be an engineer, like very much like my co-founder Chris. He was a mechanical engineer. I didn't know him at the time, but that's something I wanted to pursue. And so I had this collection of remote controlled cars, and I loved playing around with them, and I tuned them, and I made them look really good. And so those were my gadgets I used to play hours with.
Very cool. If I follow up with you a year from now and ask you where is With Clutch at, what do you hope to reply with?
I hope to reply to you telling you, hey, there were a few convictions that we had about how to approach customers, how to find them, how to present this value proposition to them. They were not right, but fortunately, customers told us what they would use if we were to build it for them. And so we listened to the feedback, we prototyped, we put something in front of customers. We started getting a lot of traction. We started saving a number of people a lot of money on their car payments. And now we're at a spot where we feel really, really comfortable and confident in what we've built and are ready to scale and put more fuel on the fire, if that makes sense.
Excellent. All right. To wrap things up on the hot seat, where can people find and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can either go to withclutch.com, or if you just want to chat or get my feedback on something or hear me out or offer something to me, like a gift or something, just go to LinkedIn. That's the best way to contact me. Look for Nicholas Hinrichsen and or Carvana or something like that, and You'll find me. And if you want to connect and chat, I look forward to that. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. All right. The last portion of our show we like to call Reach One, Teach One. We like to give our listeners one piece of actionable advice based on our guests' experiences to help them out. In your case, I want to put it out there, especially now that so many people are trying to start their own businesses in the midst of this pandemic. What's one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring entrepreneur that's looking to jumpstart their business?
Yeah. So there's this saying that I love: don't let a good crisis go to waste. And so that might sound counterintuitive. What it suggests is, while a crisis is obviously a crisis for a lot of people, and I wish it had never happened, like, you also have to look at it from another angle and ask yourself, what are opportunities that are created thanks to this crisis? And so it is very, very obvious. We have a huge inflection point in technology. People are adapting on technologies. People start using services that otherwise they wouldn't have used. People can work remotely thanks to technology. So now is a really good time to look into technologies and ask yourself, what is it that works today because of the way behaviors changed that didn't work yesterday? That would be my word of encouragement. Awesome.
I think that's a valuable piece of insight for anybody looking to jumpstart their business, and I truly, truly appreciate it. Nicholas, you shared so much with us. I appreciate you taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I had a good time.
What a great conversation with Nick. As always, everything that was discussed in this episode will be in the show notes. As always, full disclosure, certain items may have affiliate links, which, as always, if you click, will receive a small commission, which goes towards improving the show, improving the brand, and just giving all of you a better experience. So make sure to use those links. It helps us out, and more importantly, it costs you nothing. Now, as somebody who was in the automotive space for almost 19 years, it was amazing to connect with Nick for this interview. Number one, because he and I knew a lot of the same people, which was crazy considering that we had never met in any other space except for this podcast. And it just shows how crazy the internet and just the world is, that we had different career trajectories, different paths, but yet here we are chopping it up, talking about disrupting the automotive industry, making an impact, sharing stories that hopefully will fire you up and inspire you to go out there, take a risk, take that idea that you're probably toying around with and really pull the trigger on it and execute. It's funny that with everything going on in the world, this is, I gotta say, and it's not hokey or self-help, this is prime time. This is the time for you to test out that idea, to test out that theory, to take a gamble. Because at the end of the day, we only got one life. So might as well go out there, make an impact, have a blast doing it. And hey, if what you're aspiring to build or put out there doesn't work, hey, it's not a failure. It's a lesson, and you can apply it to something else and hopefully, have more control of your destiny. Like I said, this is open season. This is the time to really double down. If you're toying with an idea, as I said, or you want to get that project off the ground, or maybe you want to explore a career in streaming or podcasting or YouTube creation or whatever the case may be, execute, pull the trigger on that idea. You'll be glad you did. There's so many creators out there that are getting their feet wet. As somebody who's been checking out TikTok lately, you see so many people doing vinyl work, different artists just doing amazing things and building not only a following, but just engaging with people who just aren't aware of their work. You'd be surprised how many people are, and I'm using TikTok in this case, are just out there creating that people are just blown away by their talent and no one knows who they are. And they're on this platform making it their own. And I'm not saying to go out there and start a TikTok, but just go out there, start something, do something, take a risk, experiment. Like I said, there's no such thing as failure, just lessons. And this week's guest definitely taught me a few lessons as well, and I hope that all of you got value from it. Now, that said, if you're looking to get on to podcasting, start your podcasting journey, have some questions, need some help, by all means, feel free to email me, rich@rageworks.net. I'll try to help you out as best as I can. I'm not going to sell you a course or an ebook or anything. I was a beginner once, and if I can pay it forward and help you get on your podcasting journey or your content creation journey or launching a website, drop me a line. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be your personal Google and give you every bit of advice. You got to go out there and hunt for yourself, but got some questions, unsure about something, need some recommendations, drop me a line. I'll gladly help you out as best as I can. On a separate note, if you want to share your story on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, shoot me an email, rich@rageworks.net, or hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any of the places that you see Rageworks. I pretty much run almost all of the social accounts, so more than likely I will be the one answering you. We also take guest requests via LinkedIn. Rageworks has a page on LinkedIn, as do I. You can find me there. And if you're on Podit or Matchmaker, which are two great services to connect podcasters with potential guests, we have a profile on there for Toys and Tech of the Trade. I have a profile there as a guest as well. So if you want to have me on a show, same thing, you can hit me up via those services. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode and anything else that we're doing, please take a moment, rate us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the service that you're using. Every review helps. You'd be surprised how many PR people always ask about reviews, audience engagement, etc. So if you got 2 seconds, hit that star review, or if you got an extra couple of minutes, write a written review. We would truly, truly appreciate it. We got lots in store coming into September with some amazing guests. Some people have been asking if I'm going to do some sort of back to school guide. I may do a one just for, Toys and Tech of the Trade for back to school and working from home, because so many parents are, sending their children back to school or doing home-based learning, plus trying to juggle working from home. So if I can give you some tools, resources, and stuff that'll help you out, I will definitely do my best to do that. Of course, an episode of that nature will probably be trickling out as some bonus content alongside our usual shows. So keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. All right, folks, thank you guys for listening. follow me on any social media platform of your choice. You can find Rageworks there as well. And again, thank you for taking the time to check out this episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade. I'm out of here. Peace. Toys and Tech of the Trade is part of the Rageworks podcast network, your source for rants about gaming, entertainment, and the works. Visit us at rageworksnetwork.com.